My name is Daniel Pierce, and for most of my life I believed hard work and family loyalty were all a man really needed. I built my business from a tiny garage in Chicago's South Side, fixing cars by day, delivering parts at night. My late wife, Laura, stood by me through every broken tool, every missed dinner, every failed deal. When the first dealership finally opened, we celebrated not with champagne, but with coffee and paper cups, sitting on the hood of the first car I ever sold. Laura used to say, "You're not building a business, Danny, you're building a legacy." And I believed her. After she passed away, that legacy became my lifeline. It gave me purpose. It gave me a reason to wake up. My son Ethan was all I had left, smart, confident, and ambitious. He reminded me so much of myself at his age, only sharper, more modern. He had the kind of charm that made people trust him instantly. Welcome back, my beautiful friends. If you're hooked in and you're ready to enjoy this story, give this video a thumbs up and click the subscribe button. Again, let me know in the comments where you're watching from, because tomorrow I will be giving you another story just as interesting as this one, and you don't want to miss it. Now, back to the story. I remember the day he walked into my office smiling. "Dad, you've done enough. Let me take the wheel. You deserve to rest." His words hit me right where it hurt, my pride. I had spent 40 years holding that empire together, but hearing my son say I'd earned rest felt right. So I signed the documents, slowly transferring power to him, shares, accounts, and even the title to the family home in Lincoln Park. It wasn't about money, it was about trust. At first, Ethan made changes I didn't understand. New investors, different suppliers, staff layoffs. He said it was modernization. I wanted to believe him. He'd come by every Sunday, flash that bright smile, and say, "Don't worry, Dad, I've got this handled." I didn't know handled meant stolen.
The first real crack appeared when I went to access one of our company accounts. The password didn't work. The second time, my access card was declined at my own building. The secretary, someone I'd hired myself, wouldn't even meet my eyes. "Mr. Pierce, I'm sorry. Ethan said you're no longer authorized to enter." I laughed, thinking it was a mix-up. But that laugh died quickly. My lawyer confirmed it. Ethan had transferred full ownership of Pierce Automotive Group to himself. Every asset, every investment, even the dealership's name, gone. It was as if I had been erased. When I confronted him, it wasn't with anger, it was with disbelief. I drove to his mansion, the same one I bought for him and Samantha when they got married. He opened the door like he was expecting me. "Dad," he said casually, "I figured you'd find out sooner or later." "Find out what?" I demanded. He sighed, almost annoyed. "That I'm done being your shadow. You built a great foundation, but I'm not you. I'm not going to run things with your old-fashioned methods. It's my turn now." "Your turn?" I repeated, barely recognizing my own voice. "You took everything from me." He tilted his head, smiling that same confident smile he'd had as a boy. "No, Dad, I just took what should have been mine all along." For a long time, I just stared at him. The boy who used to beg for my approval now looked down on me like a charity case.
I went home that night to an empty house, or rather, what was left of it. Half the furniture was gone, sold or relocated as company property. The silence was suffocating. I sat in my study, staring at the framed photo of Laura smiling on the porch, her hand resting on Ethan's shoulder. "You'd know what to do," I whispered to her. "You always did." But all I heard was the ticking of the wall clock and the faint sound of rain hitting the windows. Days turned into weeks. Friends stopped calling. Former employees avoided eye contact. My reputation, once golden, had turned into gossip fodder. Everyone knew the story. Daniel, Pierce, the man outsmarted by his own son. Pride is a cruel thing. It keeps you standing when you should fall and blinds you when you should see. But one night, as I sat there in the dark, something inside me shifted. Maybe it was the memory of Laura's voice, maybe it was pure rage, but I realized something. Ethan thought the story was over. He thought the curtain had closed on his old man. I whispered into the darkness, steady and cold. He thinks I'm finished. Let's see how long that lasts. Have you ever trusted someone so deeply only to realize they were just waiting for your weakest moment? Tell me in the comments. I really want to know.
When everything was gone, I didn't fight it. I didn't call the police, didn't hire investigators, and didn't even show up at the company gates again. Instead, I quietly sold the last thing I truly owned, my old 1969 Pontiac GTO, the same car Laura and I drove to our honeymoon. Watching it roll away on a tow truck felt like watching the last piece of my life disappear. With that money, I moved into a small studio apartment in the Lower West Side Chicago. The walls were thin, the radiator hissed at night, and the smell of the diner downstairs crept through the vents. I didn't mind. It was small, silent, and invisible. Exactly what I needed. People thought Daniel Pierce had gone mad, maybe even died. I'd let them. The fewer who knew I was still breathing, the better. In the beginning, I woke up every morning filled with rage. I'd stare at my reflection and see a failure staring back, a man stripped of everything he'd built. But anger fades fast when you've got nowhere to aim it. So I replaced it with something else. Patience. Revenge doesn't need noise. It needs discipline. For months, I lived like a ghost. I stopped shaving, wore secondhand clothes, and took long walks by the lake where no one would recognize me. I started writing. Notes, plans, names. Slowly, the chaos in my head became a structure. That's when I ran into Vincent Carraway, my old corporate lawyer. I found him at a small cafe near Wabash Avenue, hunched over a laptop. He didn't recognize me at first. When he finally did, his eyes widened. "Daniel, Jesus, you look alive." Barely, but alive. He leaned in. "You shouldn't be out here. Ethan thinks I'm gone, and I want to keep it that way." Vincent listened quietly as I explained what happened, the betrayal, the documents, the stolen shares. He didn't interrupt once. When I finished, he said something I'll never forget. "You can't fight him the same way he fought you. You'll lose again. But if you make him believe he's safe, you'll win." That night, we drew up papers for the Horizon Trust, an entity under a false identity built to operate quietly. Vincent used an offshore connection to hide my ownership completely. No trace, no link to the name Daniel Pierce. And just like that, the first piece of my revenge took shape. While Ethan flaunted luxury on social media, new cars, new suits, new business expansions, I was serving coffee at a community center near Navy Pier. No one there knew who I was, and that anonymity felt freeing. That's where I met Marcus, a young man with prison tattoos, sharp eyes, and an even sharper memory. He had just finished a 5-year sentence for auto theft and was trying to start over. We got to talking one evening after closing. "You ever lose something?" he asked. "Everything," I replied. He smirked. "Then you get it. The only way back up is quiet. Loud folks get noticed." I liked him instantly. He was rough, but loyal. The kind of person who understood the streets, who could move unnoticed where I couldn't. Over the weeks, I gave him small tasks, following people, gathering info, Nothing illegal. In return, I paid him in cash. No records, no names. Soon, Marcus became my eyes and ears. He tracked Ethan's business moves, his habits, even his private dinners. The more I learned, the calmer I felt. Because knowledge, in silence, is power.
"Mr. P," he said quietly, "you need to see this." He pressed play. The screen showed Ethan standing in his penthouse, pacing back and forth. In the background, Samantha, his wife, was shouting. Her voice cracked through the static. "You promised he'd be dead by now, Ethan. Dead!" My stomach turned to stone. Ethan's voice followed, low and frustrated. "Keep your voice down. We'll handle it. He's not a problem anymore." I watched the clip twice, 3 times. Each time, the same cold calm settled deeper in me. They hadn't just wanted my company. They'd wanted me gone for good. I looked at Marcus, who was waiting for me to speak. "Thank you," I said slowly. "You've just confirmed something I needed to know." As he left, I stood by the window, looking out at the city lights. For the first time since losing everything, I smiled. Not out of joy, but out of clarity. They thought I was dead. Maybe it was time to make that true, just not in the way they expected. Can you believe that? Your own child plotting your death? What would you do if you found out the person you raised wanted you gone? Drop your thoughts below and like this video if you're already feeling my fire.
The night I saw that video, something inside me changed. For months, I'd been mourning the man I used to be, a father, a husband, a businessman. But grief had done its part. Now it was time to move with purpose. The first move came from Marcus. He'd been keeping tabs on a man named Cruss, a low-level enforcer who used to work for a private security firm. Cruss wasn't subtle. Loudmouth, too many bar fights, too many bad decisions. When Marcus mentioned Cruss's name, I remembered why it sounded familiar. He was the one Ethan had hired months ago, the one who'd been paid to rough me up and make sure I stayed quiet. The plan had failed only because I wasn't home that night. I'd been sleeping in my car, too drunk to face my empty house. That failure had saved my life. Marcus showed me the receipts, cash transfers, encrypted messages, all leading back to a fake construction company Ethan had set up. It was clear as daylight. My own son had financed my disappearance. But now, I was going to make him disappear, piece by piece. I started reaching out to old contacts, quietly. Maggie Bowen, who'd once been my chief accountant, was still working in downtown Chicago. When I met her, she looked shocked to see me alive. "Daniel, people said you were gone." "I was," I said softly. "But now I'm back, and I need your help." Maggie had always been loyal. Within days, she helped me gather internal records, fraudulent transfers, forged documents, hidden subsidiaries under Ethan's control. Every file painted the same picture: greed, carelessness, and betrayal. While Ethan flaunted success, I watched him build a paper empire, one I could burn with a single spark.
Marcus worked the streets. He followed the money, tracked payments through offshore accounts, and fed me information faster than I could process it. Each discovery made me more certain. Ethan hadn't just taken what was mine. He'd taken what was his mother's dream. Laura had believed in building something for Ethan. She'd wanted him to grow into a man of integrity. I could almost hear her voice as I sifted through the evidence. "He's our son, Danny. Don't be too hard on him." But that voice had faded long ago, drowned by what Ethan had become. Still, there were nights when I'd sit at the window of my small studio, staring at the city skyline, and remember the boy who used to sit on my shoulders, laughing as we watched the Cubs play at Wrigley Field. He'd ask me how business worked, how money flowed, why people trusted me. Now, he was using those same lessons to destroy me. So, I decided to weaponize one thing he could never resist: greed. I started feeding rumors through my old network, a whisper here, a subtle mention there. Former employees began talking about a new will I had supposedly written before I vanished, a document that could overturn Ethan's control and name a mysterious heir. It didn't take long for those whispers to reach him. Within weeks, I could see the impact. Ethan started making calls to old associates, digging for information. His wife, Samantha, attended charity events alone, tension clear in every forced smile. Marcus sent me clips, text messages, and emails from Ethan's circle. They were nervous, desperate, perfect. Then one night, as I was organizing files for Vincent, my phone buzzed. A number I hadn't seen in over a year flashed on the screen.
Ethan. I didn't answer. I just stared at it until it stopped ringing. A minute later, a message came through. "Dad, can we meet? I've been thinking about you." I could almost hear his voice, the practiced calm, the fake concern, the manipulative warmth he used when he wanted something. I read it again. "Can we meet? I've been thinking about you." I smiled, a slow, tired smile. Of course he'd come crawling back. But this time, it wouldn't be for reconciliation. It would be for the final piece of bait I was laying out. Ethan didn't know it yet, but every move he was making was already inside my plan. He thought he was reaching out to an old, broken man, the father he'd stolen from. But I wasn't that man anymore. This wasn't a plea for peace. This was a father's new war. Ever had someone apologize, but deep down you knew it wasn't real? Type yes if you've ever faced fake forgiveness. And make sure to subscribe, because what happens next will leave you speechless.
When Ethan's message came through, I didn't respond right away. I let it sit, like bait waiting in still water. A week later, I finally replied. "Sure, son. Dinner sounds good. You pick the place." He chose the Ashford, one of Chicago's finest rooftop restaurants overlooking the river, a place we'd celebrated birthdays years ago. That choice wasn't a coincidence. He wanted control of the setting, the tone, and the optics. Ethan was always playing the long game. He just didn't know I had already learned to play it better. When I arrived, I dressed deliberately. Wrinkled blazer, scuffed shoes, cane in hand. My hair had gone grayer since he last saw me, but I left it uncombed. I wanted to look tired, harmless, defeated. Ethan was already seated, wearing a dark, tailored suit, phone in hand. The moment his eyes met mine, he smiled, the same charming, rehearsed smile that used to get him out of trouble as a boy. "Dad," he said, standing to hug me, "you look well." I laughed softly. "You don't have to lie, Ethan. I look like hell." He chuckled, pretending to relax. "I didn't know if you'd agree to this. I've missed you." The waiter arrived with wine, expensive, imported. He ordered without asking what I wanted. Some habits never changed. We made small talk, weather, sports, memories of Mom. But beneath it, every sentence had a shadow. His tone was sweet, but his eyes were calculating, studying me, assessing if I was truly weak. Finally, I leaned back, sighed, and said, "You were right, you know." "About what?"
Retiring early. I wasn't ready to admit it before, but maybe it was time. I've been thinking about updating my will. For a brief second, his expression cracked, just a flicker, before he hid it with a sympathetic smile. "Oh, Dad, don't talk like that. You've got years left. But if it gives you peace of mind, I can help. I still know all your old legal contacts." I nodded slowly. No, I already spoke to Vincent. He's helping me put it together. Just small updates. I realized I want to make things right." That word, right, landed like a spark. I could almost see his pulse quicken. We spent another hour talking.
I pretended to reminisce about my failures, my regrets, my loneliness. I made him believe I still longed for his approval. I even faked a tremor in my hand when I reached for my glass. At one point, my voice cracked as I said, "You're still my son, Ethan, no matter what happened between us." He leaned in, the perfect actor. "And I'll always be your father, Dad. I know I made mistakes, but we can fix this." That almost made me laugh, the sheer irony of his performance. But I held my expression, nodding as though touched. When dinner ended, Ethan insisted on paying. As we stood to leave, he placed a hand on my shoulder, lowering his voice. "I'm glad you're updating your will," he said softly. "It's the responsible thing to do. Maybe we can meet again soon, talk about the details." I smiled. "Of course, I'll have Vincent reach out." But what he didn't know was that Vincent already had the draft ready, and every clause in it was a blade disguised as kindness.
Over the next week, Vincent and I worked late into the night. The new will looked simple, neat, believable. It left the majority of my assets under a charitable trust, but with one deceptive twist. If Ethan attempted to claim or sell any asset within a year of my passing, everything would legally transfer to the Horizon Trust, under my control through my false identity. The beauty of it was in its subtlety. On paper, Ethan would think he inherited everything. But the moment he acted on greed, he'd trigger his own downfall. When Vincent finished reading the final version, he gave me a long look. "You sure you want to do this, Daniel? There's no coming back from it." I stared at the document for a moment, then said quietly, "He took everything I built. Now I'm giving him a chance to take it all again, just to watch it vanish from his hands." Vincent nodded slowly. "You've thought this through." "Every inch of it." A week later, I sent Ethan a message. "Dinner again soon? I want to show you something important." His reply came instantly. "Of course, Dad. I'll be there." And when I read it, I couldn't help but smile, because this time, the dinner wouldn't just be about deception, it would be about execution. As I looked out the window that night, the city lights flickering across the river, I whispered to myself, "You're walking straight into your own trap, son." And somewhere deep inside me, for the first time in years, peace began to form. How would you handle a fake smile across the table from someone you once called family? Leave your answer in the comments.
When Vincent and I finalized the will, it looked like a gift from a guilty father. Ethan would inherit everything: the company, the houses, the investments. On the surface, it screamed surrender. But buried inside was a simple clause, written in calm legal language that masked its venom. To receive the inheritance, Ethan had to personally deliver a sealed letter to the Horizon Trust, the same entity he didn't know was mine. Inside that letter, a full confession, typed neatly and signed by Ethan himself, admitting to every financial manipulation, falsified transfer, and illegal act he'd committed in my name. If he didn't deliver that letter within 7 days of my passing, everything, every cent, every asset would be transferred to the Laura Pierce Foundation, a charity I had quietly established in memory of his mother. To anyone else, it looked like a father's moral safeguard. To Ethan, it would be the start of his undoing. I didn't stop there. I had Vincent file the documents through multiple intermediaries, each legally binding, impossible to erase. Once signed, the will became the most powerful weapon I ever owned. But weapons are only effective when placed close to the target. So when Ethan offered to take care of me, I agreed. I moved into his mansion, the same house Laura once decorated with soft lights and piano music, now cold, sleek, and sterile under Samantha's touch.
From the moment I stepped inside, I could feel the tension beneath the marble floors. Samantha greeted me politely, but her eyes darted nervously toward Ethan, as if asking permission to smile. I noticed the smallest details, the distance between them at dinner, the way her laughter never reached her eyes. Ethan treated me with rehearsed warmth. "You'll be comfortable here, Dad. We'll make sure you have everything you need." I thanked him, pretending gratitude, playing the part of a fragile old man desperate for peace. But every night, as I sat in the quiet of the guest room, I studied him, the routines, the late-night calls, the financial files he kept hidden in his home office.
Marcus kept sending me updates from the outside. Every day, Ethan's empire grew more unstable. His greed had spread too thin. He was borrowing against assets that didn't yet exist, signing documents he didn't understand. And while he was busy chasing ghosts of power, I stayed still, patient, invisible. Then one night, as I walked past Samantha's room, I heard muffled sobs. I paused, hesitant, then knocked gently. She didn't open the door but spoke through it, her voice trembling. "I'm sorry, Mr. Pierce. I didn't mean to wake you." "You didn't," I said softly. "Are you all right?" A long pause followed. Then she whispered, "He's not the man you remember." Her words sank deep. For the first time, I realized she wasn't just complicit, she was trapped. I'd misjudged her all along. Maybe she hadn't married for greed. Maybe she'd fallen for a version of Ethan that no longer existed. Later that night, as I sat by the window, I thought about Laura again. She used to say, "Ethan has your ambition, Danny, but none of your patience." She'd been right. And now that impatience would destroy him. The next few days passed in silence. Ethan grew restless. He spent hours in his office, his phone pressed to his ear, whispering. I knew the storm was coming. I just didn't know when. Then, one night, it arrived. It was past midnight. The house was quiet, the city lights blinking through the window blinds. I was halfway through rereading the final will draft when I heard a soft knock on my door. "Samantha?"
She stepped inside quickly, wearing a robe, eyes wide with fear. She shut the door behind her and whispered, "He's changing your will tonight." For a moment, I just stared at her. "What do you mean?" "He's in his office right now, on the phone with a notary. He said he's going to fix your documents before you can sign them again. I think he's forging your signature." I took a slow breath, the room spinning slightly with adrenaline. "Thank you," I said quietly. "You did the right thing." Her voice cracked. "I'm sorry for everything, Mr. Pierce. I didn't know what he'd become, but you need to be careful. He's desperate." She left as quickly as she came, her words hanging heavy in the air. Down the hallway, I could faintly hear Ethan's voice, calm but tense. "Yeah, make sure it's notarized tonight. He's old. We don't know how much longer he'll be around. I'll handle the signature." I leaned back in my chair, heartbeat steady. So this was how he wanted to play it. Speed over strategy. But what he didn't know was that every version of that will, no matter how he altered it, was already registered, time-stamped, and legally bound through the Horizon Trust. He could forge the paper. He could bribe the notary. But the real version lived elsewhere, beyond his reach. Still, I let him continue, because sometimes the only way to end a liar's game is to let him believe he is winning. Can you feel that tension? Who do you think will win this mind game, the father or the son? Comment your guess and subscribe so you don't miss how the tables finally turn.
It was a quiet Thursday morning when I decided to die. Not for real, but convincingly enough to make my son believe the game was finally over. For weeks,
I had been weakening his public appearance, skipping meals, dragging my steps, holding my chest when no one was watching too closely. The old businessman everyone once admired had now become a shadow of himself, frail, pale, forgotten. That was exactly what Ethan needed to see. The stage was set. The paramedics had been discreetly paid through Vincent, men who knew how to act convincingly without asking questions. The paperwork was ready, the medical records forged, and the last piece, the death certificate, had been printed under a pseudonym that only Vincent understood. At precisely 9:47 a.m., I clutched my chest at breakfast and collapsed against the marble floor of Ethan's mansion. Samantha screamed, plates shattered, and Ethan shouted for help, though his tone carried more impatience than panic. Within minutes, the fake ambulance pulled up, and 2 uniformed medics loaded my still body onto a stretcher. One of them winked, almost imperceptibly, as they closed the doors. By noon, the news had spread. Daniel Pierce, founder of Pierce Holdings, dead at 68. The story hit every business blog, every whispering circle in Chicago. Old colleagues sent messages of pity. Some even toasted privately, relieved the stubborn old man was gone. Ethan stood by the window, glass of whiskey in hand, staring at the gray skyline with a mix of satisfaction and greed. "Rest easy, old man. I'll take care of everything you built." The very next day, Vincent called for the will reading. It took place in the grand hall of Ethan's mansion. Marble floors, high ceilings, the kind of place where power had always been performed.
Samantha sat at one end of the table, quiet and pale, her eyes darting nervously. Ethan sat opposite Vincent, pretending to look grief-stricken, though his perfectly polished cufflinks portrayed a man already planning what to buy first. Vincent cleared his throat, his calm voice echoing through the room. Per the last will and testament of Daniel Pierce, all personal and business assets, properties, and holdings are hereby bequeathed to his son, Ethan Pierce. Ethan smirked. There it was. Everything he had schemed for, signed and sealed. But Vincent didn't stop. On one condition. Ethan's eyebrows twitched. Condition? Yes, Vincent continued. Mr. Pierce instructed that his son must hand-deliver a sealed letter to the Horizon Trust within 24 hours of this reading. Only upon verification of delivery will full transfer of ownership be validated. Ethan frowned. That's it? Deliver a letter? Vincent nodded. That's it. Samantha shifted uncomfortably, her hands trembling under the table. Ethan glanced at her, his expression warning her not to speak. He didn't know that inside that letter was his own confession, written by me weeks ago, describing every illegal act Ethan had committed, every fraudulent deal, every hidden account. Once that envelope reached the Horizon Trust, it would automatically trigger an alert to federal authorities. And Ethan, in his arrogance, delivered it himself. That night, he celebrated his inheritance. Champagne, laughter, loud music. Samantha tried to smile, but her eyes betrayed her fear. She knew something wasn't right. Her husband's greed had always come at a cost, and this one felt fatal. Vincent stayed late, pretending to drink, but silently checking his watch. By dawn, his work was done.
As the first light broke over the city,
Black SUVs rolled quietly into the driveway. Federal agents, 6 of them, stepped out in dark suits. No sirens, no shouting, just authority and silence. Ethan, still half drunk, stumbled to the door. "What the hell is this?" One agent raised a file. "Ethan Pierce, you're under arrest for financial fraud, embezzlement, and obstruction of justice." The color drained from his face. "What? There must be some mistake." But the mistake was already made. By him. Across the city, in a small apartment near Navy Pier, I sat quietly by the window, alive, calm, watching the sunrise through the soft steam of his coffee. Marcus stood nearby, phone in hand, showing him a live feed of the arrest. I smiled faintly, not out of joy, but relief. My hands trembled slightly as I whispered to the photo of my late wife on the table. "It's done, Laura. He finally learned what it means to lose everything." I closed my eyes, breathing deeply, as if the city itself exhaled with me. The empire I built was gone, but so was the poison that had tried to destroy me. Yet, deep down, I knew this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning of my son's reckoning. Have you ever seen karma move this perfectly? Drop an emoji if you think my plan is pure genius, and don't forget to like if you're still watching till now.
When they came for Ethan that morning, I watched from the car across the street. The blue and red lights from the federal vehicles reflected off his front windows, the same ones he used to brag about facing Lake Michigan. Agents in dark suits surrounded the house, their voices sharp and commanding. My son, the man who took everything I built, was dragged out in handcuffs, barefoot, trembling, still wearing his expensive robe. For years, I'd imagined what that moment would feel like. I thought I'd smile. I thought I'd laugh, but I didn't. I just sat there, quietly gripping my cane, feeling the weight of what both of us had become. When the agent read out his rights, I saw Ethan's lips move, whispering, "My father's dead." He had no idea I was right there. I stepped out of the car, my lawyer Vincent by my side. The air turned still. The officers paused when they saw me, and then Ethan did too. His mouth fell open like he'd seen a ghost. "You're supposed to be gone," I finished for him. "You always did underestimate me, son." He shook his head, eyes wide. "You faked your death?" "No," I said softly. "I faked your victory." For a moment, silence hung heavy between us. He looked at me as if I'd just stolen his future, which, in truth, I had. "You set me up," he muttered. I leaned on my cane, studying him. "No, Ethan, you set yourself up. I just gave you the pen and watched you write your own confession."
When they put him into the back of the cruiser, he looked at me one last time. His eyes weren't angry anymore. They were hollow. I could tell he finally understood that the empire he tried to steal wasn't built on money. It was built on principles he never learned. Samantha stood by the steps, mascara streaked, hands shaking. "Daniel, I swear I didn't know about any of it." I nodded. "I believe you. Greed blinds even the innocent who live near it." She turned away and started crying. I didn't stop her. We were all mourning something that morning. The news spread fast. Chicago tycoon's son arrested in inheritance scandal. My name was everywhere again, only this time, not as a man who lost everything, but as one who reclaimed it with intelligence, not rage. I didn't return to my old office. I didn't even want it.
Instead, I reopened the Laura Pierce Foundation, named after my late wife, the woman who had more grace in her smallest breath than Ethan ever had in his entire life. The foundation was built to give second chances to the kind of people my son would have called worthless. Marcus stood beside me during the first opening ceremony. The boy I once met at a community center now wore a clean suit, his eyes steady and grateful. "Sir," he said, "you could have given this to anyone. Why me?" I smiled. "Because you gave me something I hadn't felt in years. Trust." Vincent later brought me the final version of my new will. It was short, simple, and honest. To Marcus Hill, I leave everything, for he gave me loyalty, and loyalty is worth more than blood. Vincent raised an eyebrow. "You're sure about this?" I looked out the window at the Chicago skyline, the city that had seen me fall, rise, and outwit my own blood. "I'm sure," I said. "Ethan inherited my name. Marcus earned my respect."
A few weeks later, I took a quiet walk through Millennium Park. The fall breeze carried laughter from families and children running across the grass. I stopped near the Cloud Gate, the big mirrored sculpture Laura always loved. In its reflection, I saw myself, older, weathered, but peaceful. I pulled a small photograph from my pocket. It was the three of us, me, Laura, and a much younger Ethan, smiling with his arm around us. My fingers trembled as I brushed away the dust from the image. "Laura," I whispered, "I did it your way. I didn't fight him with fists. I fought him with patience." As I slipped the photo back into my coat, I watched a young father and his son walking by, hand in hand. The boy laughed at something, his father pretending to chase him. The sound hit me harder than I expected. "Another Ethan will rise," I said quietly, "but so will another Daniel." And with that, I turned away from the past. My revenge was complete, but more than that, my peace was restored. Do you think I did the right thing, or should I have forgiven my son? Tell me what you'd have done if you were in my shoes.